talk show where we discuss the news, share insight, bring guests from the industry, take questions, and involve you in the conversation. AI is having an impact on our businesses, our lives, our society, and everything around us. As leaders in the industry, it's our responsibility to jump in and be part of the discussion. So let's start the conversation. I'm your host, Asha Saxena, CEO of Women Leaders in Data and AI. In today's episode, we will be discussing AI and data. AI is the most disruptive technology innovation of our lifetime. Enterprises are embracing AI applications and leveraging a variety of data types, structured, unstructured, and semi-structured, for integrated processes all across different business lines and industries. Organizations understand the importance and potential impact of AI. They often struggle to move from pilot to production. According to the research organization International Data Corporation, IDC, the top challenges that organizations must address in order to scale AI initiatives are cost, hardware acceleration, compute resources, lack of skilled personnel, lack of machine learning operational tools and technologies, lack of adequate volume and quality of data, and trust and governance issue. At the core of AI, it really is data. Data is not only the core of AI, but it's also the key challenge. Over half the organizations report that they lack the volume and quality of data, especially which is required to implement AI solutions. But it's not only a question of supply. In the model development stage, one of the biggest challenges for businesses is getting data into platform. This can be difficult, especially if the data is not readily available in the right format, providing a single source of truth for governance. High quality data is beneficial not only for data scientists, but also for analysts and other data teams. To have an AI application that is relevant, accurate, and scalable, businesses need to make sure that their data, both real-time and batch, is of high quality and easy to access and shared accurately and securely with the organization, with the entire business partners within the organization. To discuss AI, generative AI, and data, we have our guest, Julia Bardmesser, a dear friend, CEO of Data for Real, Chair of Technology Advisory Council, Women Leaders in Data and AI, former SVP, Head of Data Architecture and Salesforce Development at Voya Financials. Julia, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Asha. I'm very excited to have this discussion with you. AI is such a topic currently. Like everybody talks about AI and LLM and ChatGPT.
Julia, you said it right. I mean, AI is such a buzz. Everybody's talking about it, but I think the core of AI is data. And I'm so excited we are actually getting together to talk about not just AI, but also the core element, which is data. With improved efficiency and the main intended outcome, generative AI has so far been the primary data management trend in 2023. Most data management vendors that have revealed plans for generative AI have not yet released those capabilities fueled by generative AI. Vendors like Alteryx, Informatica, Databricks, and Snowflake, as well as the tech giants AWS, Google, and Microsoft, are among many vendors that have said they're developing generative AI capabilities. But most of these tools that have been introduced are now in preview or in the product development stages rather than generally being available. Data management is really in the early stage of generative AI. No one has really worked out what large language models are going to do in the world of data management. In some ways, it's easy to use to build use cases in analytics. But how large language models fit in the backend is a little more difficult to see. In particular, when we are talking about the data privacy or compliances or governance, that's slowing the development of generative AI fueled by data management. Julia, you would agree that we are still in the early days of applying generative AI to data management. Most capabilities are still largely theoretical, or you would say in research or prototype stage. We haven't seen widespread production, deployment, and use yet. Do you see any trends emerging within the data management vendors intended to use generative AI? Or, in fact, how do you see the large language model fit in the backend, and why this may be a more complicated issue to solve? I mean, when you're thinking about the concern around privacy, data privacy, compliances, governance, do you think, is that the issue that's causing the challenge around AI-fueled data management tools, or is it more than that?
I think it's more widespread. I mean, compliance and privacy issues are part of it, But on one hand, so one of the things that's really cool about AI, that it's not only a great tool to produce analytics, it's also a great tool that can help in the back end. But to understand how large language model AI and specifically large language models can help with streamlining the backend cycle preparation of data, let's just break it up. What does data backend actually mean? So usually, if you break it up in 3 stages, you need to collect the data, then you curate the data, and then you distribute the data. And there are multiple ways of doing it and multiple technologies. But collection of the data, that's where a lot of, I see a lot of conversations about using LLMs, because LLM is really NLP on steroids, right? It's natural language processing that produces natural language. And there are a lot of challenges usual tools have in collecting data and extracting data from non-structured data. So I haven't seen the tool yet, but let me give you an example where I think it would be great to have AI on the collection of data. So if you go around, for example, CRM, customer relationship management systems, the data that can be collected through them is really gold. But the people who provide this data are salespeople. And salespeople generally are very much focused on interaction, on conversation. They're not very focused on data entry after the meeting. It's something they have to do. And if the company structure, there sometimes there's sticks in place, so carrots and sticks, not a lot of carrots, but quite a few sticks if they don't add data in. But they usually do the least amount necessary to get by. How much more value would there be if there was a tool that can, the salesperson can talk into their cell phone right after the meeting? I met with so-and-so, this was the topic, this is our next steps, here is the sentiment I felt during this meeting towards our product, here is where the interests were. And if you have a AI tool that then translates it into data, not into the notes, because that exists, but in actual data that you can then move to analytical platform, combined with external data about the company that they just visited, and produce a really actionable and valuable next step for that salesperson to take with that company. That would be gold, but that doesn't exist. And I see huge opportunity there where you can use AI and natural language processing and LLM ability to get that information in, to process as information and output it as data to provide that type of functionality. So I haven't seen that yet, but I think that's a huge untapped opportunity for a lot of companies out there, especially for CRM platforms. The second step, curate. So that's where you have data quality, where you bring multiple data sets together and you need to be able to use all of them, and you need to solve the problem of common keys. This is where a lot of current AI and machine learning technology from a lot of vendors are concentrating. It's finding how to connect multiple data sets. Again, as an example, the salesperson, let's say the salesperson was really good. They have entered the information, they picked the right company, and now this information is available in your analytical data platform. You now have information about this company from external vendor. External vendor has a totally different name for this company. So for example, a salesperson said, I'm going to use the name of my company, Data for Real, and the external company has Data for Real LLC, New York, New York. How do you know it's the same Data for Real? Again, AI-based tooling, LLMs, can have a huge impact there. That's still a problem that a lot of companies spend a lot of time and money and resources, and it's hugely manual to be able to connect and integrate multiple data sets. The last piece is distribution. So again, if you look from the business perspective, what you want to have is your data platforms being available for multiple business purposes, for multiple business teams. Well, what happens is that multiple business teams use different language when they use the data. So what we've been doing as data geeks in the backend is encoding that language within the data sets we provide. It's a very labor-intensive effort, and it's not perfect. If you have LLMs and AI model that can translate between the language you have your data in, which is standardized enterprise language, and the language this business group wants to use to see this data in, you can do that translation on the fly. And that would, again, create huge efficiencies and much more usability out of all the efforts company and all the funding that companies put in to create those enterprise data platforms. Again, your question about the vendors, there are some vendors out there in the more on the technology startups that do some of those things. That is semantics consumption models, so which is that the last problem that I mentioned. There people, there are also companies. Informatica has, I think, a tool in this. There are a lot of startups that help with curation, but none of it yet took off, and much more beyond, as you said, POC tryout stages. I think we're just in the beginning of this, really, but huge potential. But you're right, it's still all in very much a POC stage.
I love the example you gave about CRM, when salespeople can talk into the CRM and really be able to, curate the notes accurately. The fear, even in healthcare, when physicians have to dictate their notes, they are worried about dictating the notes because they feel that the data won't be entered accurately. I think that's where the challenge is, whether these language models can really understand the curated text which is done through the models. Is it accurate or not? And I think there's a lot of perfecting the models. We're still in the early stages of getting these models right, but we cannot deny that the data quality is critical. Even before any of the AI application, I think data quality was critical to any kind of analysis of data. Data, when we talk about data, and I know you've been such a big proponent of data management, not only just entire world of data management, but also quality and governance. You speak very strongly about why that is important when we're working with any kind of initiative around analytics or AI or building models. When we talk about data quality, it's really directly influences the success of machine learning models, especially now. And all the AI initiative, they said, the garbage in, garbage out. And we said that always in analytics and programming, but especially now, it's becoming more important as we're working with AI and the machine learning, where model performance completely depends upon the quality and relevance of training data. When we're looking at AI and ML developers, they're all working on preparing the data set to train the models and the algorithms they create to produce the correct and accurate output. I think the accuracy becomes really important when we're working with a model. I mean, one of our clients I was working with in healthcare, always said to me, Asha, especially in healthcare, we can't take chances. If the model is not accurate, we cannot implement the model, because now we are really working with very high impact on the quality of diagnosis or treatment. So, really important in certain industries that the models really work effectively. And so the data becomes really critical. So let's talk really about, how can organization really focus on the quality of their the data, either when they're curating the data, then when they're inputting the data, or when they're actually working with the model, especially with the large language model. What do you think the organization can do to ensure data quality, especially in the world of AI?
So data quality, it's one of those completely non-cool subjects. It's much easier and much more fun to have a conversation about a large language model or AI, and it's very sexy. And data quality has been around forever, and data quality management, data quality measurement, issue management, resolution, all of those governance topics that are kind of boring at this point and not at all cool. But as you have said in your introduction, it's very important because, again, not only it's garbage in, garbage out, but for AI and large language models, data quality becomes even more important. And it's actually much harder way of data quality. So data quality is really important for large language models and for AI for many reasons, and I'm gonna get to it. But the thing is that the way data quality has been done so far, and in banking industry, for example, to respond to regulatory demands and to make sure that their financials and their risk calculations are correct, it was mostly on fairly simple dimensions of data quality. Is data there? Is the data element there? Is critical data element? So it's very narrow. Critical data element, is it there? Is it not? Is it formatted correctly? Is it within certain range? it did not look at accuracy. Very, very rarely, because we don't really have good tools, and it's very complicated rules to look at the accuracy, and finding the problem is not the same as fixing the problem. So this combination of creating a rule that that has a direct business impact, that's complicated and then complicated to solve, most of the companies don't go that far. They have enough trouble with making sure that all the data is present that needs to be present. So now you take it to the world of machine learning and AI. So you have to train the model. So if we take medical examples, if the model is only trained on the outcomes for male patients, for example, I'm making it up, but it's a common use. So you want a recommendation for the pain, for the amount of pain medicine. And if your model is only trained on certain population, which happens most of the time happens to be male, it may not be appropriate for if you're treating a woman. So you have to make sure that your data is not only of right quality, but it's accurate for what you need to, for the output that you're expecting and how you're expecting to use it. The whole question of bias and data scares me. I just recently, a couple of days ago, wrote a response to LinkedIn post, and I talked about we have to be really careful and probably should, at this point of the maturity, stop using large language models in the applications that have a real impact on people. For example, I've read somewhere, and that scared me so much, large language model being used, or AI model being used in sentencing. So trying to predict the rate at which a specific person will commit the crime again, and base on that prediction, base the sentencing recommendation. That's just really scary, because can you imagine the amount of bias in the training set for that model? I mean, it's not the model that's biased, it's society that's biased. And if using data that society produced to reflect back at it, and you impact the amount of time somebody would spend in jail, that's mind-boggling. So I wouldn't, and I understand like people want to combine a lot of information and present it in easy to use format. So I understand why would you want to do it, but there are huge reasons not to do it. And it goes back into data quality, not only for the data that goes into the model while it's running during execution, but very importantly during the training space. So training data sets, how do you produce them? How do you, on one hand, have the real data, but you free it from the bias? I don't think that's a problem we can solve, that's been solved yet. And we need to solve it before we start using large language models for the places where there is a real impact. So, justice system is one. The other one is decisions who to give loans to and what interest to charge. For insure, the same for the rates for the insurance. So anytime it has life or monetary impact on real humans, in the places where we know the society, the data we have so far, we have accumulated, is highly biased, I would hope people would not use them. There are many other places where you can use them, where it would have a really positive impact, and we discussed some of them in our early discussion. Just we have to be really careful.
Julia, you spoke about something which I feel very closely to, is the bias that gets coded into the AI model. It's so right that we will very quickly start depending on these models. And if these models are biased and we don't take precaution of how we input the data and how these models are being used, we will be in big trouble. And I think that's the whole reason, my whole initiative of women leaders in data and AI came about, is really that was my worry. You kind of hit the nail on the head when you spoke about the biases that can get coded and can get actually implemented in organizations and in our world, which is super, super scary. And I know, Julia, I still remember you and I having coffee in New York City and talking about this, and we both being concerned about where this world could go. And, I want to, first of all, thank you for chairing the advisory council here on technology and AI, so that the leaders, and especially the female leaders, can get involved in really looking at how the data is getting inputted. But also, this is something which I think organizations need to really think about it seriously, is that are we engaging in diversity of thoughts, diversity of data, and how we do the data prep are we using the right tools and frameworks to build the data models accurately? So I think everybody is talking about being ethical and responsible, but I think people have to make sure that they are putting the talk into action and being cautious about the threat these models can really cause.
Yeah, one of the things, Asha, I just wanted, like, I've recently, so now AI tools are the tools that screen the resumes. So you have to, so if you're looking for a job, what you're being told that you have to maximize your resume for the AI screening tool. So AI screening tool, like immediately, right? It's on the data that either the company has generated in their hiring decisions. Now we know, everybody knows that the hiring decisions have been incredibly biased over the history of humankind, right? Or our general recent history that produced all of the data. Now you have AI screening tool that's using this data to make decisions who is appropriate and who is not. So I think there is a whole industry, I think, and there is a huge opportunity actually for the vendors to solve that problem of creating the data sets that are first both real, but also bias free to train those types of models. I don't know, Asha, if you've heard of any vendors. I haven't really heard of anybody yet. I know some consulting companies, large management consulting type companies or technology consulting, they have their own approaches of cleaning this data and creating unbiased synthetic data sets. But there are problems with synthetic data sets as well, because they basically remove the specifics that you need to have to get the edge to differentiate yourself. So it's not that simple.
And that's why I think, Julia, we speak about having the diversity in the team, in your leadership. That's what the WLDA stands for, is bringing women leaders on the top, hiring and making the practices. They say, what is the human value? Make sure that our values are right in the real world, so we can code and program these values into the machine learning or AI models. But I want to change the topic a little bit. When we talk about business intelligence or really analyzing the data and giving you recommendation, and in our example, if it could be a recruiting model, and how the model is recruiting from different kinds of resumes, but really how does the model can create business intelligence or convert and converse in natural language to share the insights from the data. Now business intelligence and how it can be impacted by AI and ML and how it can be enhanced is something what I'm curious about. One of the challenges when we think about business intelligence is to really deal with the increasing volume, variety, or velocity of data, and especially in the data prep time, when you're prepping the data, cleaning, transforming, integrating the data from different sources or format. It can be time consuming. It can be error prone, or it can require a lot of manual intervention. So when you're working with AI and ML, it can actually automate and optimize the data prep by using techniques like data profiling or quality or data integration or data enrichment. I read about IBM Watson Knowledge Catalog that uses AI and ML to discover, classify, govern data assets across the entire organization. It says that it can also enrich the data and data from external sources, like and improve and provide context to the metadata that has been created to provide the value. So there are some tools that's coming up. Microsoft has a tool called Syntax. Salesforce has a tool which I think you probably heard about or used, Julia, in your work. Einstein Analytics uses AI and ML to provide advanced analytics and insights for the business. They say that it can also generate natural language explanation, recommendation, and prediction based on your data. So what I really want to talk to you about is it too early, or have you seen an AI model that have had the positive impact on organization using, especially in business intelligence, to further the business goals and objective?
Yeah, well, AI has been, machine learning and AI has been in our tool set for a while now. And especially you mentioned the Salesforce or more distribution. I have seen a lot of positive impact when you can have AI machine learning models, and LLMs give even more power to that, to provide real insights in the sales, marketing, and servicing of the clients. So in clients relationship management and in marketing, I think that's one of the best uses that we currently have around AI and LLMs. Another, again, and I think it's still a gap, I haven't seen tools yet, but I think there is a huge opportunity there for the vendors. So BI reporting, business reporting has been with us forever, right? MicroStrategy way back, like early 2000s, I think that's when it started, where people started creating dashboards or business analytics or reports. And many of the companies have thousands and thousands of reports that still get generated every day or every week or every month. And they provide so much information, and they usually run on potentially not well curated data sets. So you can have multiple insights. And some of those dashboards, even if they're designed extremely well, when you look at the dashboard that has a graph, that has some kind of schematic, color schematic, has some language, you try to figure out what it's trying to tell me. What's the point? And you have to really think about it, and it takes time. And I have put dashboards like that into tools like Salesforce. So Salesforce, for example, has a really good integration with Tableau reporting. But then salespeople look at it and like, okay, what is it telling me? What am I supposed to do based on that dashboard? So I think one of the potential uses of LLMs is to be able to look at all of this BI reporting on a specific topic and abstract, here is the next step that you should take. Here is what the point is. This is all of our data and all of our dashboard. So you don't redo all of it, but you use what's been done. And you say, well, based on all of this information that we have and all of the thought that went into business intelligence by creating it, here is the language explanation. Here is what you should do. Here is the best way to market. Here is the group of people you should send this message to. This is your next best step with this company. Here is the concerns you should address that we've had generally. So I think that's a huge possibility for LLMs, for the tools using LLMs on that. The other one that we've talked about a little bit around the curation of the data and simplifying and accelerating that path as well. So, but I think there is a lot of opportunity around BI. The other one is all of those reports that are not being used, having a tool on the back end that would go through all existing reports and pick out the ones and say, you have 5 reports, they all touch on this topic, they produce different answers, which one do you like, and why don't you kill the other 4 of them? Like as an enterprise architect or the head of enterprise data, I would love that. The other one, speaking of compliance and governance, we didn't really touch on that. Where LLMs can actually help is, again, it can go, because knowing which data is private, that's a huge metadata management challenge. And companies generally don't do very well with metadata management. It's fairly abstract. It requires a lot of business understanding and participation to do business metadata well. It's difficult to allocate priorities and funding because it's just fairly abstract. Now, LLMs come in, you can train, that's not a difficult one. You can train on what data is private, and you can go and say, for example, you have exposed private data on your SharePoint to people who don't have access to it. Wonderful application. A lot of CISOs would love it. A lot of record management people would love it. Again, you can do a lot of basically discovery based on non-structured data that can really help you to govern and secure your data and make sure that nobody has access, or only people who are supposed to have access to private data, and ensure compliance with all of the regulations and laws that you have. So I think that's another huge opportunity for the vendors in the space.
No, I think all around data privacy, data compliance, regulations around responsible and ethical data practices, I think all these becomes more critical than ever, because we are working with models that are going to start making their own decision and learning from itself. So how do we make sure that as we are in the early stages of building these models, that, Julia, you bring up really important points, from bias to compliance to regulation. all these and governing metadata, which you're right, not a lot of emphasis are put on that due to funding or priorities. But and another thing which I want to talk about, which you touched upon earlier, was the synthetic data, or when the data start getting created, when AI is generating content that can cause data population and ruin generative AI future. You spoke a little bit about earlier on how the impact of the synthetic data, or when the data that is generated by AI can come into play and really dilutes the information of the original data set. So a recent study from researchers in Canada and UK explained the phenomenon of model collapse. And this is really interesting because model collapse really occurs when new generative models train on AI-generated content and gradually degenerate as a result. So when we're talking about model start to forget the true underlying data distribution, even if the distribution does not change, what it means is that the model begins to lose information about the less common, but maybe important aspects of the data. And we were talking earlier about how AI, when the generation of AI models progresses, model starts producing increasingly similar or less diverse output, and that becomes a problem. When we're talking about generative AI models, they need to train on human-produced data to function. When trained on model-generated content, new model exhibit a lot of defects that cannot be irreversible. The output becomes increasingly wrong or homogeneous. So when we think about these models and model collapse, it becomes really critical how we navigate that. So Julia, as we think about no agreed upon way to track large language model generated content at scale, one can propose options of community-wide coordination among organizations involved with large language model creation to maybe share information or determine the origin of the data. So Julia, as we think about these model collapse and the challenges that comes with the model collapse, as we are working with the AI generated content, where do you see, and what's your opinion on the large model generated content at scale?
So that's such an interesting question. By the way, till you and I talked, I didn't hear the terminology model collapse, but I don't know if you saw recently, there was an article around ChatGPT now that a lot of people are using it and inputting data, and it's using, by the way, one of things like public service announcement, all the data you put into ChatGPT, it's using to generate answers down the road. So don't ever put any confidential information into ChatGPT. So this is public service announcement, part of it. But one of the things that's happened to ChatGPT, when it just came out, it answered the question, what is 2 plus 2, correctly 99% of the time. And I think now it devolved to, I think 30, I don't remember exactly, but it's like way low. So most of the time now, if you ask, and I haven't tried, I should go and try. If you ask ChatGPT what's 2 plus 2, it will give you the wrong answer. So I think it's a very basic illustration what Asha you're talking about, because as model is using its own generated output, it's degrading because you have less and less information. So if you now step away from ChatGPT and consumer use of data, and you look as a company, so what you're looking for, why do you want to use large language model or AI? You want to differentiate. You want to make sure that what you do shows the value of your products, of your services. So that's the whole point of using your data and machine learning or any type of analytics. You want to differentiate your own company. Now, on one hand, your differentiation, your value is on the data you have generated as a company plus the external data. So if you only use external data, everybody can use it. It's not your edge. You should use it to enrich it, but it's not going to generate the edge for you. If you only use your internal data, you probably lose a lot of enrichment and context, so you should use the both. And a lot of value is actually found on intersection of external and internal data. Now, you have a problem. All of us have problem that we talked about, the bias in both internal and external data. So quite often the answer to that is synthetic data, so data generated by some other model. Well, then you have a problem that you just spoke about, because if you keep using data that's being generated, you lose touch with reality. So you may not have a bias, but your next best action recommendation doesn't really give you the next best action. it's not the best, it's not the next, like it doesn't give you anything. It was to train the model and to run the model. If you use real life data, you will have a problem only, you will have a problem of bias. If you use synthetic data only, you will have a problem of not having an accurate result or having model degenerate. So finding that middle ground where you use real data so you can get the real output, real best next action, but stripping it of bias, I don't think we solve this problem. We're not at the level of maturity where we know how to solve that problem, because you have problems both on the side of full reality and you have a problem on the side of synthetic reality. As I said, this is very exciting field because there are still a lot of questions we don't know how to answer. And we're all trying to figure out the best way to answer. And some of them will work and some of them will not. But that's the excitement about being in this time, in this business, and figuring all of this out.
Julia, thank you so much for such an insightful and engaging conversation. I love ending this interview basically on what an exciting time this is. We have challenges, we have opportunities, and we also have advancements. So how we engage with technology really depends upon us. Are we using and building models with a real data set, which is filled with biases, or we are engaging with the data by AI generated data set? Are we dealing with model collapses, and how we are dealing with model collapses? We are going to continue developing and engaging with technology, learning to evolve and building opportunities. You know, as they say, as soon as the large language model worked through open AI, ChatGPT, there were tons of more business opportunities that came up. We are living in an exciting time. How we engage with technology, where our values, human values are, and how we continue to be good human with good values, be diverse, inclusive, but also make sure we are engaging with technology in a responsible way. When I was at a conference where I was talking to some of the kids, and I was saying that really it's reinforced learning. If you give the feedback and you say 2 + 2 is not 4, and you keep feeding the wrong answer, the model will get confused and will start learning from the data it's creating and how you engage with it. So I think it becomes really important for each one of us, and in how we develop, how we create, but how also we engage with the models. As we evolve the technology, humanity has to really stay on top of doing the right things. You and me have to become more responsible in how we are the leaders in technology or engaging with technology. I'm excited about the future, and I want to thank you for joining us today, because these conversations really are important to have, and to make sure we continue having these conversations. My goal would be to bring you more thought-provoking discussions, cutting-edge news, expert insights in our next episode. So please go on the LinkedIn, subscribe, follow, as well as share your comments and tell me what you are enjoying, what you would like to hear more about. That's all for this episode. I'm your host, Asha Saxena, and this is the AI Talk Show. See you next time.